I welcome you all for the 8th Creative Theory Colloquium 2021. The title for this year's colloquium was COVID-19 Pandemic, Grassroots Experiences and Democratic Responses. The colloquium was organized by Foundation for Creative Social Research.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I welcome you all again to this 8th edition of Creative Theory Colloquium. And we have had two great sessions, and I am sure that we will have another two wonderful sessions post lunch. Now, the topic for this particular session is Pandemic, Migrant Exodus, and Livelihood Challenges. Chair for this session is Professor Ravi Srivastava, former economics professor at CSRD, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Speakers for this session are Bijaya Bohidar, President, Gapeshana Chakra, Bhubaneswar, visiting faculty, Department of Political Science, Ravenshaw University, Cuttack, and a public intellectual. Our second speaker for this session is Mr. Pranabjyoti Nath, IS Officer, 2005 batch, Secretary, Water Resources Department, and Secretary, Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribes, and Backward Class Departments, Government of Kerala. Our discussant for this session is Sarath S. Kumar, research scholar at Center for Political Studies, JNU. And the rapporteur for this session is Mariam, MA student at Center for Political Studies, JNU. Now I would request the chair to take over and begin the discussion. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Mani, for inviting, for organizing this seminar around grassroots experiences. I would request everybody to please mute themselves now if they haven't done it already, so that there is less disturbance for the speakers. Thank you for organizing this two-day seminar online and also for inviting me to it. Now, many parts of the country are moving at least to the hybrid mode of organizing seminars, and I hope that can continue. That we don't see a resurgence of the pandemic in the days and weeks or months to come. I just want to say just a small introduction at the beginning, that for somebody who's been looking at migration from various vantage point of views for I think more than 40 years, I was absolutely shocked at the response of the central government to the migrant crisis, the lack of empathy, and the ignorance about migrants. I don't think a single person who has worked on migration issues extensively was contacted by the government of India before, for example, when it filed its first affidavit before the Supreme Court in April 2020. The figures that it gave out at that point of time had no relevance. It gave out a figure of 41 crores as the total number of migrants. These migrants includes, a majority of these migrants are actually permanent migrants living in cities and are not vulnerable. And they were not vulnerable during the pandemic at all. So the government of India did not even have a clue as to who was vulnerable. And then as responses unfolded, thanks to the initiation of the Supreme Court intervention, very, very subdued responses from the government, central government, they ran, I think many of you would know, I'm also Mani is from the Center for Political Studies, so I think a majority of the participants here probably come from their center, that interstate migration is actually a central subject as per the Constitution. But here, the center shifted the entire onus onto the states. And the states were left to start a blame game among themselves as to who would pay for what would be the processes initiated, and so on. And the center just washed its hands off for several weeks altogether. Ultimately, only one particular scheme was launched by the center to be implemented through schemes announced by the states, and that was a scheme for food grain rations for 80 crore migrants. The other scheme which was announced under the Rojgar Yojana was really no scheme, because it was actually a convergence scheme of existing projects in 115 districts identified by the government, with absolutely no additional allocation and no real focus. It included, for example, building an oil pipe from Odisha. So I mean, so it was many parts of the scheme had no relation to the government, to the crisis and what was happening on the ground. But the states responded. Kerala was foremost among them. Odisha was the other state which came up not only with short-term risk. Actually, when the affidavit came before the Supreme Court, the affidavit showed that half the shelters created for migrant workers were by the state of Kerala. And it came up very quickly with a short-term and a long-term package. So did the government of Odisha. So some of the states responded better than the central government, but nonetheless, the whole exercise of exodus was an inexcusable mess, beginning from the sudden lockdown, which led to an unprecedented economic crisis. I mean, India is the only country which showed a decline in GDP in 2021 to the tune of 7.3%. All our neighbors, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Nepal included, showed positive rates of growth of GDP from 2 to 3%. So it was a crisis which was brought upon us at that point of time through the nature of the lockdown which was initiated. And the subsequent measures which were taken exacerbated the crisis of the migrants who were without social protection of any kind, and who had to fend for themselves, who were psychologically terrified. There was a disease concentrated in urban areas, who therefore fled with whatever means. Every single highway in the country, from south to north, from west to east, from north to east, was flooded, and people were being chased back, put forcibly into camps by the police. Although not, of course, there were sections of the police and the sections of the administrator which were very sympathetic to the migrants who were making the exodus. But by and large, it was an unbelievable mess as it unfolded. And then the migrants returned to the villages to face, obviously, after either their households or they themselves having taken large volumes of debt to cover the expenditures which were required to go back home, and or to cover their subsistence in the urban areas as long as they had to stay there. And in the villages, they obviously faced starvation and unemployment in most parts of the country. The states initiated some measures, but these were really very, very incomplete and half-baked measures at that point of time. Some did slightly better than others, but by and large, the source states, as they are, which are the source poor and poorer states, could not really provide enough succor to the returning migrants and their families. But nonetheless, because of unemployment to the cities, and by December 2020, estimates show that only about 7 to 10% of the migrants who were part of the initial exodus were left in the villages. But then the second staggered lockdown was announced, This was in some sense better because public transport was kept open. It was more localized, spread over, although it spread as long. 4 to 6 weeks, there was a complete lockdown in one state or another state. But nonetheless, because of this, the migrants who were affected could go back home. There was a second exodus. They could go back home in a more orderly, less desperate fashion. And the and the and the income of the country, growth of the country was also affected less in the second. But the problem here is that the migrants who were again faced with the second round of unemployment and destitution, for them it came on the backs of the first round. The first exodus in the first round of unemployment and starvation. So for them it was a double whammy. And this shows that long-term measures have to be in place. Long-term measures will reduce their uh, uh, work insecurity, will provide social security to them, will provide housing arrangements to them where they are not at the whims and mercies of landlords. So it has been a more generalized problem for the poor, which spread to the rural areas in the second wave, much more than in the first wave. But the problem was truly serious for circular migrants in India. So I'm glad that Manin, given that there was such an affected lot, I'm glad that Manin has put this topic on the agenda here. And we'll hear three people narrating to us their experiences from their vantage point of view, academia, public administration, and so on. And we'll begin, therefore, with Dr. Bohidar.
The pandemic and the subsequent lockdown, in fact, exposed many of the issues, contradictions, inequalities that had been built into the Indian society. To start with, the lockdown that was announced at 8 o'clock and imposed from 12 o'clock, within 4 hours of time, clearly gives us an idea as to how the state understood or ignored the existence of migrant workers. It was completely insensitive to the fact that migrant workers exist in this country and in such a large number. I would not say it ignorance, I will say it some kind of a deliberate negligence of an issue. The issue had not been recognized. And thanks to the tragedies of lockdown, the loss of jobs, the loss of health, security at the place of work, forced people to try to come back to their sources from different parts of the country. And the way they came back, walking on foot, cycling down, walking on the rails and dying on the way, was something that perhaps made the people of this country sensitive to the existence of a problem. Perhaps the media images touched our conscience and people understood the conditions of migrant workers. There had been a lot of misconceptions about the lives of migrant workers at the level of the common sense. Many people, educated politicians, they believed that migration is a good thing and people who go out, in fact, become more prosperous. There are exaggerated imaginations of the prosperity of migrant workers. Now, it were the images during the lockdown period which smashed that kind of an understanding, and the nation suddenly came to believe or know the kind of hardships, vulnerabilities, tragedies they face in their lives. These have been well documented. These have been seen, and I don't have to narrate the kind of things that we saw and the entire society saw. The other point that I would like to make in relation to this was the non-recognition of migrants by the state itself. Because the state, the Indian state, did not have any kind of figure, or even the state governments, maybe perhaps Kerala had some data, but the other states had no data about the number of people who migrate out of their states and into their states. Now, even now, there is no record of how many people come from outside this state. But after the different kinds of relief and rehabilitation measures, we have some rough idea of the number of migrant workers in different states. These numbers may not be correct, may be understatements, but still there is some figure, because there were a number of schemes by the state governments which were made available to the migrant workers, and there was some kind of enumeration. The enumeration has not been, again, very satisfactory. We don't have data about the intersectionality dimension. We don't know how many of them are women, how many of them are Dalits and tribals, minority communities, different caste groups, etc. But in spite of that, there has been an attempt, or the states were forced to make an attempt to generate some data on the number of migrant workers going out of their state and who registered to come back, which is again very incomplete and doesn't give us a very clear picture, but gives us some indications of what the number might be. And that, in fact, makes it our responsibility as an academic community also to engage in the process of generation of reliable data on migrant workers, very detailed, disaggregated data on migrant workers. And for the state, without data, how do they make policies? And if they make policies without data, it only shows that the policies are simply lip services. They are not sincere about those policies, nor do they want to implement those policies if they don't have data. Data is a basic necessity for making policies. And as we have been used to suppression of data, manipulation of data during the last few years, these have been subject matters of public debate and public anger. So there is no surprise that we don't have data on a marginalized section of the society, because it is the process of marginalization which the states would not like to recognize. And they would like to suppress, they would like to hide, just like they suppressed the unemployment data and many other data. So I'm just not surprised. And very interestingly, as Professor Ravi Srivastava pointed out, that in the census, migration due to marriage is recorded, and that forms a large part of the migrant persons in this country. And how could you, put that along with migrant workers? How could you add them up? And what does it really show? Does it really help? These are very fundamental questions that this COVID crisis made us raise. I'll not go into the empirical dimensions of the issue I'm supposed to discuss, but I would like to say or argue that when we understand the migration exodus in particular, or migrant workers in general, linking that to livelihood challenges and the pandemic, I use 5 core concepts to understand that. One is the concept of history, how the structures of power and market class are evolving. And while I do that, I also choose market, state, class, or in particular, and social structure in general, and community to understand this problem. The community played a very important role. When the migrant workers came back home, there were mixed responses from the local communities from where they had gone. In some parts, there were hostilities, basically because of the kind of propaganda that was made about, say, the migrant workers being carriers of the disease, the virus, and the nature of the disease itself. There could be hostility, there could be an inability to accept migrant workers who come back. But yet there have been a large number of examples in some places where the local communities came forward, tried to help them out, provide them with food and other things they required, and they did accommodate them. So the response has been very, of different kinds. But this is something that needs to be studied, in depth to have a very clear picture of what it is. Now, historically, certain things have been evolving in this country since independence. Especially the structures of inequality have been evolving in relation to the power of the state and the market. The working class has got quite marginalized during the last 30 years with growing informalization of the workforce. The changes in the organization of production process in capitalism, and perhaps as a political strategy of capitalism to, grapple with possible working class dissensions and agitations. Such informalization and migration are taking place on a large scale, which is, I think, very widely recognized by scholars. Now, there is something that has been happening, and that has been happening largely because of the neoliberal, the structure of the neoliberal economy, the state policies, and the inability of the rural economy to provide sustenance and livelihoods to the poor, to the landless, to the small peasants, to the marginal peasants, to the poor. It was that, and the tribals and Dalits. Now that had started pushing out a large number of people from these areas to other states, cities, to seek livelihood there. Now that has been continuing, growing, and there has been a kind of growing insecurity of life, liberty, and wage, in fact. Now these are well documented in many migration studies. I don't have to quote any figure here. You are all quite learned persons, leading scholars in your fields. So we all know about that. Now, the wage has been declining, unemployment has been rising, and people are being forced to migrate, often to work in extremely vulnerable situations, risking their lives and health, taking the whole family out, depriving children of their right to education. So health rights, education rights, economic rights, so many rights of the large working class have been affected over a long period of time. And that simply came to the fore. These were all exposed because of the pandemic, because of a sudden kind of catastrophe that struck us, and that was responded to by a very insensitive state in a hurry to protect corporate rights, not just bothered about the existence of the migrant workers and the poor, without bothering about what would happen not only to the migrant workers but also the poor who are, who earn their daily livelihood on a day-to-day basis. What happens to them? It was state insensitivity, and the state insensitivity has to do with its relationship to the market and social classes that exist. That the state's character is a capitalist state, and a capitalist state which tries to help the capitalists to intensify the process of exploitation while withdrawing from welfare schemes and welfare activities. The decline of the welfare state and a kind of intensely exploitative capitalist system which the state has been favoring. Now that character becomes absolutely clear. Many scholars have noted the increase in wealth on the part of the richest persons of this country during the COVID period. While employment shrunk, poverty increased, more people became poor in this country. Still, the wealth of a certain section of the population kept on increasing, thereby further increasing inequality. And it is this COVID crisis which in fact strikes me again and again with the notion of equality and inequality. Should the notions of equality and inequality not constitute an alternative political narrative? Now, this has been sidelined, in fact. The state responds by some fragmented, small, immediate measures, not with the purpose of reducing inequalities, but with the purpose of giving some little bit of help so that many more people will not die and the state would be able to legitimize itself and the capitalist system would legitimize itself. But then the larger question of inequality and equality don't really appear in the political discourse nor in the media narratives. And hence I feel that after closely observing this entire process, that these are crucial concepts which should help us to understand what really happened during this time. Now this exodus and the problems they faced at the destinations during travel and also in the source where they came back, they were offered some relief and they were offered some work under the MNREGA. And the MNREGA, and I'm speaking on the basis of experience of Odisha, the MNREGA in fact didn't prove to be very effective. It helped a little bit, no doubt about that. But skilled and semi-skilled workers were not interested in that. And it had its own problems. So MNREGA, a scheme which had been marginalized by the present regime at the center, somehow came to some kind of rescue of the extremely poor. But this was again not sufficient. This was not enough. Some people thought that the COVID crisis leading to the exodus of workers might later on create some crisis in the capitalist enterprises and the bargaining capability of the workers should increase after that because the industrialists would like them to come back. But to me, there is no evidence that the bargaining capacity of the working class has increased. The other thing that I would like to highlight is the assault on working class rights during a period when the migrant working class was facing its worst ever crisis, the labor codes. I'm not, that's not my topic, but that's something that all of us are sensitive to. While they are facing these problems, these issues of an unprecedented nature, they were being robbed of their rights, whatever little bit of rights they had, not enough really, but little bit of rights they had, were being systematically robbed off. And that has not led to any kind of resistance or protest at the All India level, unlike the farmers' protests. That's something that shocks me and that exposes the weakness of the political process, the weakness of opposition politics, which has not been able to mobilize these migrant workers who happen to be involved in agricultural activities and some non-farm activities in their own villages. These are people who have two kinds of identities. They are workers, migrant workers, and at the same time, they could be poor peasants, landless agricultural workers, or involved in some other kinds of activities. And most of them, in some places I have seen, are tribals and Dalits and the so-called lower castes. Now, these are the people who have been victims of capitalist exploitation as well as the inabilities of the rural economy to absorb them, the lack of development of the non-farm sector, and the inability of agriculture to accommodate them in livelihood pursuits. And that, in fact, raises very important questions related to what the alternative livelihood strategy would be. But another issue that attracts my attention or that disturbs me a great deal is the very notion of rights.
Dr. Bohidar,
Yeah.
you've come to this part at the right time because 5 more minutes.
Okay, I have 5 more minutes. Yes, I'm conscious of that. Thank you very much. I'll conclude. Now, the issue of rights became very important as the health of the working class was in question, and food and medicines, various other kinds of things, lack of proper kind of shelter, because shelter becomes a very important issue, and these migrant workers live in slums. If somebody is affected by COVID, how do you provide him an isolated place to live? The right to shelter, which has not been really articulated in the political domains, requires to be articulated. The right to a kind of decent shelter, a healthy shelter, where one would be able to fight a pandemic situation like this. The right to education, the education of the children of migrant workers and poor people became a very important issue. The right to health. Now, these are rights which requires to be redefined in the light of our experiences. These are rights which have to be redefined as equal and qualitative rights, not just rights. Equal right to qualitative health, equal right to quality education, so on, equal right to some dignified shelter. Now, rights require to be qualified, rights require to be defined. That is a problem, for us, a challenge for those who do political theory, how to reconceptualize rights at the present situation. The last thing, in a couple of minutes, I would like to bring your notice to is what we think or what this has taught us about livelihood issues. That livelihoods have to be provided at the source place to minimize exodus of people from the source to the destination. The people are getting pushed out because of poverty. If somebody chooses to go for prosperity, we have no problems with that. But when people are pushed out because of distress and get into very vulnerable conditions at the workplace, there is something that is not desirable. And that was the image of the working class that the entire nation saw. So, how to go about the rural economy. The growth of capitalism in this country through the period of planned development and through the subsequent period of neoliberal development has been such that focus has been on heavy industries, mining, etc. And especially in states like Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, which have too much of mineral resources, governments have focused on the use of these resources to go for mining and heavy industries, mineral processing industries, is a kind of strategy to address the question of unemployment and poverty. They define development. The rural and agrarian infrastructures have not been built. There has to be a rethinking, complete rethinking on agriculture and the non-farm rural sector which can develop with much less public investment than these large industries and mining activities, which require not only huge investment, but also they take away natural resources from the control of the poor, from control of the people, and they are being handed over to the rich. So there has to be a complete rethinking as far as the rural economy is concerned. Besides that, of course, administrative measures, the enhancement of the capacity of the state, the right kind of policies, so on and so forth, which have been debated on. And the last sentence that I would like to say is that we have been indulging in short-term measures largely. How to cope with the immediate crisis. It's more important to have a long-term perspective, which might require certain structural transformations, so that we can handle situations like a immediate catastrophe like COVID, and also address the long-term process of growing immigration of the working class. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Can I ask Pranab Nath to come in now, please?
The respected Chair, Sri Ravi Srivastava, sir. Sir, I'm also from JNU. I was in sociology. So, sir, I know about you, sir. So, nice to see you, sir, here. And also my previous speaker, Sri Bijaya, and the organizers who have provided me the opportunity to come and join. So my experience will be fully limited to Kerala. So I will not be commenting on the migration of the laborers at the rate of the COVID-19 in last 1.5 years. So I will be broadly limiting my understanding to the state of Kerala, because during that period I happened to be holding the charge of labor commissioner in the government, even though I am now Secretary Water Resources. So my seeing the entire activities over that period when the lockdown immediately happened, then what was the response of the government and what is the lessons learning out of it. And if you keep these things, that pandemic, exodus and livelihood, these three things if we want to link. So at the beginning, I must also tell a little about the context and the background that how Kerala economy looks like. In Kerala, there has been a long history of labor organization and formation of welfare fund boards of the workers across sectors. So there has been a significant amount of presence of labor in public discourse, in policy making, and also huge sensitivity across society, including the community networks like Kudumbashree, where labor has been always a prominent issue. Dignified way of living has always been given a priority in terms of all aspects of social economic life. So therefore, the state has been very, very proactive since the beginning. The lockdown occurred on 24th of March in 2020. When lockdown happened, there was a huge chaos, as Sir Bijay sir has mentioned in his presentation. I definitely agree. There was a huge chaos in the entire country. And of course, Kerala was one of the first state to take a very, 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 very prompt action of how we handle the issue. And the major problem with the migrant workers, which in Kerala, normally government has decided consciously to call it guest workers. And the issue is that there are studies of migrant workers, but there is no absolute headcount or data to rely like which pocket where. So the first problem the state encountered is the lack of data. So our approach was basically at that point of time threefold. One was those who are in distress, immediately we need to give support whether we have the data or not. And therefore we converted all the workers where all the places where workers were staying, whether it is those people who out of distress came to a common place, those people who are stuck in a industrial workplace like or a construction work site, or those workers who are scattered across all we defined as camps. And camps, the definition of camp was given because we have to provide them humanitarian support. But this was a human crisis. So what does it included? It basically included providing food, shelter, medical, and also, if needed, socio-psychological support with the help of all the district health mission teams. So this was a priority, first order priority. Second order of whenever there is a grievance, how to record grievance, how to approach grievance, and how to make a system that the grievance not repeated. The same person does not call twice for food. So we created structure district-wise of multilingual teams composed of migrant workers itself in all 14 districts, including one team at the central level, where grievances were channelized and addressed and followed. And also, we from where the grievance came, we made a system of through a software. We made a system of sending them reply that okay, this grievance have been redressed. And also, if twice a grievance came, we used to make it a critical area. So this was a second layer of kind of a like first was a defining a camp, second was a grievance, and the third was the existing all resources pulled together. What are the resources means? One is of course bureaucracy itself is a resource because government has large number of departments starting from home guard, assistant labor officer to the panchayat level workers, kutumbasri, civil society network. So we mapped most of the networks and we tried to, whoever can do what, we mapped at the level of last unit. That is in labor, we have this assistant labor officer, which is last almost similar to areas like of a block or a taluka. So we mapped it so that whenever required, these resources can be addressed to reach to the worker. Because since people are staying in a distress condition, in a pandemic situation, they may need multiple dimensions of problem may come up. To address this entire issue, then we realized that now we cannot wait, we have to collect the data. So I collected total 4,34,280 workers detail of 13 parameters by engaging volunteers. So I engaged a student, I engaged our last mile government officers, wherever who is possible, created a detailed pro forma starting from like from where they come to where they work, what is their background, which sector they are working, what is their mobile number detail, etc. And other number I made it not mandatory. If somebody want to disclose, they can. So like the 13 parameter bank account details. So certain details I collected so that I can make a proper planning at a immediate point or also maybe in course of time future. And we collected this 4,34,280 workers detail, which is not an exclusive number because the migrant workers numbers may be 15 lakh to 20 lakhs or even maybe more. But that was the database that I collected people broadly staying in various camps at that point of time. And the most important use of this database was that when I collected this data at the rate of, for example, I can give you, Kerala there are 14 districts, Orissa there are 30 districts. So if we have both these 14 districts of Kerala mapped against the 30 district of Orissa, then we can, whenever we make a departure plan by train, I can map actually who from Ernakulam is going to Ganjam, who is from Ernakulam is going to Baleswar, or in Bengal, who is from Ernakulam going to Murshidabad. So in fact, I made the entire 4,34,000 workers into database and more than 300 trains we prepared and sent them in a systematic way, which was not happening actually in other parts of the country. It's only because of this lack of data collection in a systematic way. What was important was that from where they are staying, I identified something around 37 points in the state where people are locating in 14 districts, who are going to various parts of the country. Broadly, the 90% of the population was going something around 35 districts, most of the population in across states, mainly 7 states. So when we have this database, then it becomes systematic to sending the people back home in a more dignified way. Otherwise, it will be just everybody. So when I publish them this thing, you see, I have this data to you. I asked my officers to go and explain them. People were more cool. They were not really so desperate to go back home. They knew, okay, state is making some effort. So I made, I could speak Assamese, Bengali, Hindi, Oriya, and Malayalam. So I myself made some videos and distributed across in various media to reach to the worker that, okay, government is making this kind of a plan for you. So that was one thing, that to keep the people's tempo alive, because they were caught up, hold up, now no certainty was there. So more important, I think, in this regard at that point of time for the government was, at a decentralized level, there should be humanitarian concern. That was more important. And people were willing to understand. I am not saying they are like there was no problem in Kerala. The problem came up many places. Like we had to lose some three workers. I think they got unwell and they lost their lives. But still, number of that is incidental deaths, etc., was very less, because we could convince the worker with proper data. I said, okay, you see, in this district there are 5,000 workers from where, from Kannur, actually going to Katihar. So they know, okay, I have planned the day I will prepare your train, so you will go from here. So that way, like, we made a very detailed plan, and I think that is immediate kind of. I agree with Bijaya sir, because this is a very long-term. State has ignored these issues over a long period of time, so it needs a long-term approach. However, dealing with the pandemic and dealing with the lockdown and opening of lockdown, that needs a human kind of a touch with proper evidence-based kind of a decision making at that point of time. That really, I think, as a field practitioner, I can tell that really helped in terms of, like, when you say pandemic and exodus, when you say, so this helped data and systematization of the entire things from a human angle. When we say the livelihood kind of things, what came to my mind, one is that livelihood lost the moment the lockdown was declared on 24th March to, I think, first week of June. There was a immediately stop of everything. So livelihood is almost actually lost. Those people are without any work. From state, we provided them food at that point of time, and enter whatever was required. Most of them were penniless without any, but in Kerala, we try to reach to the maximum. We allocated fund resource through panchayat, through Kudumbashree, and through state also, from the disaster management fund, etc. So we mobilized resources to provide them food. Also, we ensured somewhere where we could not reach, the contractors also ensured that we enforced through our officers to provide them food, shelter, etc. So immediate that time requirement during this lockdown, livelihood support was only basically giving them basic essentials. What happened when they went back their home? I tried to trace certain population, because there is large number of population coming from district like Calicut to Tuamal Rampur of Orissa in Kolahandi. So we found that many people went back, they could not get much work there, but few of them got some jobs, etc. So important thing was there at that time, I think the recipient state could have also planned accordingly, like how many people of mine are coming from other states. So similar kind of a planning was required there. Wherever they have done, there was a proper planning. That is for immediate. Immediate option was, I think, only was available in the state government is a Mahatma Gandhi NRGS scheme, was like could have been, people could have been deployed. However, in terms of long-term planning, if you see, also my previous experience, like I was Orissa Livelihood Mission Director for almost 3.5 years. If I just see, like, relate to Kerala and Orissa, if how to handle this migrant workers going back, falling back on the Kerala, Orissa economy from Kerala, the support could be actually multifold. As Bijay sir has rightly said, the non-from, most of these workers are either, they are some petty work, small works they do, unskilled most of them. Somebody do cycle mechanic, something seasonally, somebody do some electrician works also. They come back. Some have some very little but fallow land which are not utilizable. Most of them are marginal land holders. So these people have varied background, caste, community, and all way varied background, and they are unskilled, most of them. So if we want to, one is definitely re-energizing the rural economy, building up schemes like Livelihood Mission, MG There could be convergence of this kind of schemes, because MG brings money, whereas Livelihood Mission actually can bring skill or organizing the community. So organizing the community along production line, in course of time, maybe it will time taking little, building FPOs, etc. Farmers President reaching to the market, working on farm, non-farm, NTFE along all the sectors as per the population's requirement. Also, maybe building up skill, because I have seen those workers who came back to Kerala, if you ask me, those who were broadly skilled. Kerala economy employs around 14 category of workers, starting from construction, plywood, marine fish industries, seafood, plantation, hospitality, iron and steel workers, footwear worker, wooden furniture worker. So like that, there are 14, 15 different sectors where they work. I have seen where the people have come back. Apparel sector people and the marine fish, many people, marine food production, many people have come back. Why they have come back? Because they were skilled. Many of these girls who works in the apparel sectors from Jharkhand, Orissa, and some parts of Northeast. These girls actually they have done their Dindal Upadhyay Gramin Kaushal Yojana or Prime Minister Kaushal Yojana. They are the short duration course of industrial sewing machine operators. So girls basically work either in Kerala or in Tirupur or in Bangalore or some parts of outskirts of Chennai. So these girls have basically they skilled, so they went back and they come back. Those who are not very skilled, either they lack confidence or something, they could not come back. In Kerala, track actually how many people have come back, where have they joined the sector. We have made an app called Atithi actually, where those who have returned, it's an open, we have given entry for registration for the workers, for the employers, and also there is an others option also. So where they can actually register if they have come back along with their sector. And we wanted to know whether they were working earlier in the same sector or in different sector. Our limited or preliminary understanding is that those who were skilled, they have come back, many of them. Now recently, before the second wave, all the workers who were working, particularly from working as in the restaurants, most of them from Darjeeling, Sikkim, and from Northeast. Those people also have come back. These are also people with short duration front desk course, etc. So skilling is an important, my point is that skilling is, if you want a sustainable kind of an employment or livelihood, it is better if they get skilling within their own economy, job within their own economy, but at times may not be possible. So far as possible, we must have to strengthen our local economy, which can absorb development of the MSMEs. So all these have to work in a convergence in the government. MSME is a very important sector, which is a credit starved sector, which needs a large number of workers actually can be absorbed. If you see the maximum number of migrant workers working in many parts of the country are in MSMEs actually. If there would have been MSMEs in the local sector, they would have worked there. So this is like as a short term, immediately we kind of a paracetamol kind of a solution, and in the long term, like we have to really investigate, scan, find out what is the cause, and need multifold solutions. It can't be like a immediate kind of a one solution. Again, coming back to Tuamul Rampur, there has been a study by one of the civil society organization in Kerala who has done a very good study. They mapped actually like those migrant workers who are working here, they have given their money like some kind of a remittance to Tuamul Rampur. Their wives have actually become members of some of the SHGs, etc. And those who invested in a better way. So, like many cases, the migrant workers' money getting invested back to the economy have also been result. So these are like multiple kind of a path we need to look forward. If we really want, and it has to be another some kind of thing state has to take, like providing ration, etc. of the migrant workers. If we can actually integrate ration network, like out of 5 members, 1 member is staying in Karnataka, and the rest 5 member is in Jharkhand. So, like if it is a one nation, one ration card kind of thing completely become functional, they can actually avail all the safety net benefits that they could have otherwise availed in their economy. Because most of the times when the migrant workers come to work, they become rootless. So they enter whatever they earn, they goes for their basic struggle. So this kind of a safety net, if follows from their own economy, can definitely help. So I think broadly, sir, these are the few points I like to highlight. If question comes, sir, I'm free to answer. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think you've taken less time, but there will be more questions for you at the end of it.
Sir.
I look very closely at the Kerala responses.
Sir.
After wave 1, up to quite some time.
Sure.
I'm happy to hear some further details. So I'll now ask Mr. Sarath Kumar to come in, please.
So, good evening, all. These were all, like, both the papers were very interesting and comprehensive. And we started the session with the comments from the chair, some remarks from the chair that especially some points are very important, like how, like the chair suggested, how the central government is not ready to take the responsibility, even when the interstate migration is a duty of the comes under the responsibility of the central government. So when we analyze why this happened, this shows that this neoliberal state is more interested in ensuring cheap labor. We see different states trying to woo the capitalists by saying that cheap labor is available in our state. Subsidies like labor militancy is less in our state, or we will give free electricity, free water, etc. So this kind of a neoliberal logic has become hegemonic in our economic system, and so any attempt to own the responsibility of safeguarding the rights of workers is generally discouraged. So I think we can relate this to this larger political atmosphere where withdrawal of the state is glorified, and the commitment shown to the workers' cause is considered as unfashionable or outdated. Also, we discussed about the importance of long-term measures to ensure that the migrant workers are safe. And of course, I think the success of the Kerala model can be partly seen in this vision to invest in such areas to ensure that even when the guest workers come to the state, uh, they get adequate housing facilities, they get adequate health insurance, etc. So the Apna Ghar program, which the Kerala government had uh, executed, the health insurance program that was executed there, and of course how the government schools in Kerala is has become like a point where the guest workers families get integrated with the indigenous population in or the local population in the state. Uh, so in this against this larger background, uh, s- we can discuss some of the important points that came up in these papers, in both the papers. So the first speaker pointed out how this poverty in the rural areas is pushing the people to migrate to the cities. But he also underscored that uh, even when commonsensically people assume that people are becoming prosperous once they migrate to the cities, that is not the case. They are suffering even in the cities. And his argument was that this pandemic exposed that reality to the people, that the migration per se or migration itself does not guarantee that they are moving to prosperity or they have achieved some kind of uh, mobility. While I agree that it's an important point, but at the same time, uh, I think we need to see some more dimensions about this migration. Is it really the question of just having poverty or prosperity in the villages, or is it something more than that? Do it also ensure some kind of social mobility to the people when they come out of the rural uh, rural village ecology, which has its own oppressive structures. So, uh, so I think we need to consider this dimension, whether we should see migration itself as a problem, that we talk about the need to generate more income or generate more employment in the rural areas itself and all. But uh, is it really the solution? That dimension also need to be discussed, because it's natural for the people to migrate for uh, better prosperity, for better opportunities to other parts of the country or even other parts of the world. So the idea of prosperity that attracts the migrant labor is always relative. It's not static, it's not absolute. It need not be always about having absolute poverty in the village. Even if you have some kind of uh, livelihood in the village, you may still migrate to the cities or to better places for better livelihood. So what we need is an attempt to ensure that even when you migrate, you are safe. Even when you migrate, your rights are protected. And the paradox we are facing now is that uh, on the one side, we see the government being very vocal about the ideas about one nation, international integration, that one nation, one ration card, or one nation, one SIM card, or whatnot. Like this one nation has become a fashionable slogan in this era, uh, especially after the BJP came to power. But at the same time, when it comes to the protection of workers' rights, the central government passed the buck to the state governments, and even the state governments are included in divisive policies. We can see that during the pandemic, the tendency was that on the one side, the state governments will say that these migrant laborers are outsiders, so we are not ready to share the resources for them. On the other hand, also those states which tried uh, to bring back their laborers even when the lockdown was there, they were being hailed uh, as rescuers. So I can give you two examples. One is, of course, people are familiar with the example of the UP government being hailed for sending buses to Kota to bring back students, uh, some 250 buses. And even when the lockdown was there, and even when the official call had been to stay wherever you are. Um, and on the other side, the Kerala government was demonized for demanding that the train should be sent to the state of Kerala only after giving information, prior information to the state government, so that these arrangements could have been made. So when the Kerala CM took this position that prior information should be given, then the railway minister's reply publicly was that he's not concerned about his own people. So this idea that it's the responsibility of the home state to protect the like domestic migrants was very much there in the air when this pandemic was going on. So this paradox we can see that on the one side there is too much talk about national integration and one nation, but at the same time on the other side there is this uh, national fragmentation. So I think more than being skeptical of the idea of migration itself, what is more practical or what is needed from a progressive point of view is to reclaim this idea of national integration from a working class perspective. To say that wherever I work in this country, I'm entitled to have some rights. Wherever I work in this country, some minimum facilities I should get. That kind of a reclaiming of the idea of national integration from a working class perspective, from a livelihood perspective, is the need of the hour. Uh, and of course, the paper also talked about the need for equal rights, and it underscores the point that no one is safe until everyone is safe, which the pandemic reminded us that no one is safe until everyone is safe. So this, I think, this commitment to equal rights is also need of the hour. Now, moving to the second paper, the second speaker, he like in a very elaborate manner explained how this legacy of labor organizations and all has its own role in ensuring that the guest workers in Kerala are treated uh, with a human touch, with a humanitarian concern. So the history of militant labor or labor movements in Kerala, which ensure the rights of the workers, and which later lead to institutionalization of these rights through welfare boards and all, which Patrick Heller calls institutionalization of class struggle. So class struggle is no more happening in a very direct level, but there is enough institutions to ensure that workers' rights are protected. So that background has been, or that legacy has been used to protect even the rights of the migrant workers or guest workers, as the Kerala government called them. Uh, so also the role of political leadership, I think, is very much important in that. The paper was more focused on the administrative aspects of the issue, but I would like to add some more about the political issues also. In Kerala society also, there are divisive tendencies coming up to consider these guest workers as an other who are getting undue benefits from the state government. And one of the allegations that were raised against the state government was that, look, this state government is not concerned about the local population. They're giving everything to the Bengalis, quote unquote Bengalis, because in Kerala, commonsensically, the term Bengalis is used to denote all these guest workers, generally from the north, even though all of them are not from Bengal. Generally, commonsensically, that term is being used. And the right wing Hindutva forces in Kerala exaggerated it a bit more, and through their media spread this narrative that Kerala government is giving undue benefits to the Bangladeshis, that a large chunk of these migrant workers or guest workers are Bangladeshi infiltrators, and the Kerala communist government is promoting these infiltrators by giving them free food, free accommodation, and all. But the role of political leadership, I would like to underscore that the political leadership clearly rejected these narratives and stood with the commitment that this is our duty to protect them. So we could see ministers coming and educating the people, trying to convince the people that whatever we are doing for the guest workers are not a not out of our generosity, it's their right. So this idea of working class solidarity, the idea of inclusiveness, and the commitment of the left political leadership to these ideals have played its own role in ensuring that the guest workers are treated in a humane manner. So instead of the neoliberal model, where on the one side the state itself will not ensure any safeguards, two, it will never compel the employers to do anything. This is a neoliberal model because it is based on the appeasement of the employers, the investors, appeasement of the investors. But as Sir explained in his paper, not only that the state government initiated its own measures in ensuring or safeguarding the rights of the workers, it also compelled the contractors, the employers, to ensure many of the basic facilities for the workers. So I once again would like to underscore on this importance of this political leadership and the political ideology that helped in producing such a welfareist inclusive model in Kerala, which may act as an alternative to the neoliberal divisive model that we witnessed in other parts of the country. So, I once again thank both the speakers for the insights they provided, and I hope more discussions will take place in the question answer session. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarath. I mean, this was a very thoughtful intervention on your behalf as a discussant, and you covered both issues in, that were there in the paper, but you also actually went beyond that to raise some issues as a kind of a fresh agenda. So let me, I mean, is it all right if the speakers comment on the discussants uh, at the end, and if we go ahead with the questions first?
So questions will be better. Let's pick up the questions first, then the speakers can respond both to the questions and the discussants.
Okay. So how do you want to do the questions? The answers, I think we give some time to the speakers. We have still, I mean, we have at least 25 minutes, 25 minutes for questions. And then the speakers can respond. I'll take 5 minutes at the end. So, how do you want to moderate the question answer? Do you want me to do it directly, or do you want to do it as moderator, Akhil?
No, sir. I think the questions can be raised first, and the speakers can note it down. Then they can reply to them.
Okay.
Both ways.
I mean, how do you
Or
want
both
it
ways.
to
Yeah.
be raised?
Um,
Through the chat
in the
box?
right,
Do you want
No, no.
them to?
They'll ask, sir. They can do it in the chat box, and also they can ask.
So please come. Please ask questions. If there are additional questions in the chat box, then Akhil or I will bring them to the notice of the speakers, or they will also keep a note of that. But please unmute yourself, unmute your video, and ask the questions. Uh, please be focused. I mean, don't take too long, so that others get a chance. Yes, anyone?
Sir, there are questions on the chat box. You can take them up. Should I read it?
Yeah, I can. I have seen the questions. Can I take it? So the first question was basically to share.
Uh, Pranab, do you want to take them now to make a note of them and take them at the end?
Oh, yeah, yes, sir. As you say, sir,
I,
I can take it.
I think it will be good. I think people will also have questions apart from writing in the chat box.
Yes, yes.
So the
Let's see
point
if
is
there are
that
direct questions.
yes,
Let's handle them first, and
yes,
then
yes,
we give enough time to you
yes,
and to
yes.
Bijaya to respond.
Okay.
Okay. So, anybody would like to come up? Yes,
I
Nasreen,
think
you would like.
Nasreen, yeah,
Yeah.
you may go ahead.
Thank you so much for this excellent, actually, panel. This is an opportunity to hear and Professor Srivastava also. I'm just kind of curious on two accounts. One, this internal migration is an issue that is obviously very integral part of our domestic politics. My question is pertaining to the pandemic itself. So the pandemic seemed to have accentuated certain kind of inequality and rightlessness. So would it be agreeable to say that in the absence of the pandemic, such problem would not have persisted or would not have existed? Or is it that the pandemic has created a different kind of scenario which has gone beyond a particular domain of rightlessness that kind of exists? And within that domain, I want to also bring in two concepts. One is, citizen migrant as a concept, and pandemic citizenship. Would you say that there's a difference? Should there be a difference between the two, or can they be conflated? Thank you.
Thanks, Nasreen. Anyone else who would like to ask a question? There are no hands raised, nothing else in the chat box. So
So,
you're welcome to
yeah,
come on.
so we can start it from the speakers now, and if
Let's give a couple of minutes.
yes,
Takes a
yes,
couple of minutes for people to,
okay.
to.
No, sir. What I'm suggesting that we can have second round of questions and answers also.
Okay. So at this stage, I would request the speakers to take about 5 minutes each,
Yes, sir.
and then come back if there are more questions. Pranab, many of the questions are.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So you can go first.
Yes, sir. The first question is regarding to sharing the perspective and or intervention, the political movements and the non-government organization. Yeah, definitely. So since I just mentioned, as a part of my talk, I just mentioned it. However, as Sarath has pointed, the entire political system in Kerala, which has been a product of the evolution of series of uh, events like People's Movement, Kerala Societal Parishad. So there has been a huge amount of support to the downtrodden for an inclusiveness-oriented society over a period of time in Kerala. Therefore, the way it is easy to intervene in an issue like this in Kerala, it may not be very difficult. It may not be the same way in other parts of the country because of the lack of this context. So, which itself is this context itself is the solution lies in it. And so far as the second question says the humanitarian concern, I mentioned it's a human issue. Obviously, it's a human issue. But at the same time, it is not that they are devoid of any right. Humans also have right. So it's dignified. If you remember, I mentioned the point of dignified living, which is more important. Kerala provides a dignified way of living when, during this pandemic period of time, out of 14 districts, I visited 11 districts, and almost around 35,000 workers I come across. And most of the questions I asked, one prominent question was why they want to come in Kerala, why they have come to Kerala. If they given an opportunity, will they come back to Kerala? Then most of their answer is that Kerala recognizes dignity of labor. Even the people do not know them, they don't try to exploit them. Workers, if somebody works in other than Kerala, Hisab is a contractor, he works here, their rights are much protected, they can speak up. So, dignified way of living has itself provided an attraction for migrant workers to come to Kerala. If you see from which segment people are migrating to Kerala, one is the Murshidabad district of West Bengal, which gives maximum number of migrant workers to Kerala. It's, I think, a huge, any sector, entire construction segment is from Murshidabad. But they are not the worst of the economic ladder in the population back home. When I ask them how they come to, one is a social network, they tweet come, and they want that some kind of a relative improvement of their work that they are doing. They have seen somebody going to maybe Bhubaneswar, somebody going to Patna, and some have come to Kerala. And many of them, I am told, have gone abroad also, from Murshidabad. So it is basically, as the concept of it is not exactly absolute poverty is not the cause of a incentive for migrating from his own place to other place. So only thing is that when he migrates to the other place, this dignity of his living, his rights have to be well protected. And that well protection does not happen only by government order. If you see Kerala, it is not by government order it has happened. This is, the society has get organized, the socio-political system, as Sarath has mentioned. The class struggle is not have to be seen as a class struggle in all spheres. The protection of the right of each and everyone in the society in an institutionalized way is much important for having a better and healthy society. And I think that is how the people still love to migrate to Kerala, only because of not only just better wage. Of course, better wage is definitely a cause. But at the same time, for example, I can give you from pandemic time one lesson we learned. There was already one concept called Awas, where there was around 5 lakhs of migrant workers already was insurance into Awas. There was a concept called Apna Ghar, which Sarath mentioned. It is basically Apna Ghar is a model house for the migrant workers in the district level. It is made. Now we have come up with a concept after this pandemic issue, the concept called Alloy, which means that migrant workers friendly residence. What we have done, that wherever migrant worker is staying, why not to make it a minimum basic facilities that somebody has to get in a house, whether it is a sanitation, whether it is a lighting, whether it is a space, all kind of that is basic requirements as a human being somebody has to get, he must be ensured. So therefore we said government will not make migrant worker friendly house. We will ensure migrant worker friendly house. Whoever house owner, we identified 3 locality, Vaipat in Kottayam, Perumbavoor in Ernakulam, and Patambi in Palakkad. In these 3 places where there is a large constellation of migrant workers, we have taken up these houses where migrant workers are staying in large numbers. And we are trying to convert them that you must have to ensure if you give a house to a migrant worker, these basic minimum standard, we have created a scheme, done a scheme, and our Honorable Minister has inaugurated it around 6 months back, and it is running now. So we wanted to ensure migrant workers, whatever dignified living anybody else in Kerala can have, they should also have, in all terms of amenities they want to get. So it is that not only government will keep making, also government will ensure and facilitate things so that whoever is doing it, they have that sensitivity and they come up with the same line, in the same pace. Because otherwise what will happen, government will keep making planning and policies, but at the ground nothing will happen. So involving the larger stakeholders in real sense and ensuring it. And what we have done, to ensure this alloy concept, we have set a local ward level of the municipality or the panchayat. That committee will certify it. We are not certifying it. We are giving the parameters only. There is a committee, there is an execution mechanism. The committee will verify the execution, not we. As a government, when I drafted the scheme, we brought to the Honorable Minister. Minister said that no, we should not, you will not doing the inspection. It is not an inspection model. Let local committee or the local ward have to the understanding, let them uh, understand that the things are fulfilled, it is being done, then only will be accepted, not by any government officers reporting or certifying. So it is involving the community at large, all stakeholders at large. I think these are very interrelated issues. Then only you can, and it is not that any society can solve the problems of the migrant workers without solving some other problem. It's all related. This is how the society accept similar kind of issues. It is a social perception. How they're accepting these issues. How society recognizes right. Right? It is not about street workers or anybody. When we work talking about rights, it is everybody's rights, human beings' right. They are only one segment of the population. Once this concept comes, I think it will be the issues will be taken in a much more cohesive and better way. I think broadly I touched. If not touched, kindly point out me. I will add on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very comprehensive. I think that the last question and also this question by Shamna Hussain, although this has been answered by Pranav, but this can also be partly looked upon, touched upon by Dr.
Bijaya.
I address Sarath's question later at the end of it.
Sure, absolutely. You will come back at the end.
So I can take up Nasrin's questions, which I think relate to what I spoke. Now, she talks about internal migration and pandemic accentuated inequalities. I think she agrees. We agree on that particular point. But she talks about citizen migration and pandemic citizenship, if I have correctly heard you. If that is what I heard, I find this pandemic citizenship a very temporary thing, which has been caused by the pandemic, and after it goes, maybe we don't have that particular issue. But this citizen migration or migrant citizenship, however you formulate that, to me is a very potent concept in the sense that this refers to the long-term issues of loss of citizenship rights by the migrants, pandemic or no pandemic. Pandemic simply highlighted the absence of citizenship rights on the workers or the denial of citizenship rights to the migrant workers. So to me, citizen migrants or migrant citizenship is a more potent social science concept than pandemic citizenship. This pandemic citizenship may disappear after the pandemic. But then the concept of pandemic citizenship can also have some utility in the sense that it goes beyond the workers. It relates to everyone, in fact. It relates to the students, to the children of the poor parents. It can relate to their health issues, educational rights, the impact of digital divide on online classes, and so on and so forth. These are very important issues. But the other concept to me is a very long-term, has long-term implications. But I'd like to, thank you for conceptualizing like this, and would accept both the concepts as very useful. But then the first thing that you said about the problems of the migrant workers, in the absence of pandemic, the migrant workers surely had problems. But the pandemic and the lockdown made the larger public conscious of their hardships. That is something which this pandemic contributed to. In the absence of that, I don't think people would have seen the inhuman and very undignified existence of this section of people called migrant workers. Now, if I relate that to Sarath's initial remark on migration, whether it is simply caused by poverty or by a desire for social mobility, both are true. If it is for social mobility, if people move out to improve their life situations, if they are educated, if they are trained, if they are skilled, go out for better conditions of life, that's not a problem. We are in fact not discussing that as problem. We are problematizing such migration which is caused by poverty. So we are more concerned with that right now. We are not against migration as such. Migration has been a characteristic of human civilization right through its evolution. Civilizations have been constituted by migration. States have been constituted by migration. So migration is a process which has to go on. Now, on your this question of one nation concept, the one nation concept very cleverly disguises the merger of Hindutva and neoliberal agendas. And it, in fact, this is a strategy for establishing a new kind of hegemony, centralizing power and resources. So one nation concept is something which is not really acceptable. We would rather talk of more decentralization. More decentralization, not simply to handle a pandemic situation that we had, but also to manage democracy and development in this country. And I would agree with Mr. Pranabjyoti when he says that it's not simply the state and administration. It's also the society and different societal processes, which are very important. Take, for example, the role of trade unions as it has been in Kerala, which has contributed to a far more favorable or far less unfavorable condition for the migrant working class. So, decentralization would mean all that. Now, if I have time now, or if there are other questions I will answer, I'll just like to add one very important point here, is that the migrant working class has not been sufficiently organized, has not been politically organized, in fact. The mainstream trade unions have not really succeeded in organizing them. All of us know the increasing percentage of unorganized workers in the workforce, in the total workforce. It's almost unorganized workforce, in fact. And as the trade unions have not been able to organize them effectively, I do not know how much they have really tried, but they have not been able to organize them. And I have seen, especially in Odisha, two very important things that I should mention right now. One is that there have been some local level trade unions. They call themselves trade unions. And they have been consistently engaged with the issues of migrant workers much before the pandemics. They became very active during this time in asserting their rights, in looking after their livelihood issues, and even going to places outside the state to protect their rights, get related to the trade unions in the destinations. But then the mainstream trade unions have not really been successful. I would not use more uncharitable words to describe what they have or they have not done. But I would like to mention that they have not really been successful. And it is this whole question of organizing the migrant workers, especially the unskilled ones, going from abject conditions of poverty, that has been missing, and that has weakened their struggles and their assertions of rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that was again very, very insightful and very useful. Naseem, your question was actually has already been partly answered by, or mainly answered by Dr. Bohidar. But just to add that pandemic citizenship, we don't need to talk about it in the migrants concept, migrants alone, as has already been pointed out. Actually, it introduced a severe restriction on citizenship rights, rights of association, and so on, rights of protest for all citizens. And these are therefore, I mean, the National Disaster Management Act can and did become a tool in the hands of authoritarian government, not only to quell dissent, but also to bring in very highly unpopular measures. Which is exactly what happened during the last, 17 or 18 months. So that you're absolutely correct in identifying the issue. And with respect to trade unions, I think just to build a common this thing between your comments, Dr. Bohidar, and Sharath's this thing. I mean, one needs only to think of the plantation workers' strike in Kerala a few years ago by informal workers, where they did not allow a single organized trade union, central trade union leader to visit them. Only the then chief minister was respected enough and allowed to visit the striking workers, and no one else. Such was not only, I mean, not I mean, such was the degree of alienation and distrust between the informally employed workers in the plantation industry and the organized trade unions in the plantations and even outside the plantations. Let me stop here, and if there are any other questions, please feel free to raise them.
I think there are also questions in the chat box. Somebody has written something. I couldn't see it.
There is a question by Shamna Hussain, and she says that again she reflects on the whole. It's a comment actually. It reflects on the citizenship, and if anybody later on wants to take it up, one of the speakers, they can do that at the end. Yeah, it's not really at this point of time.
Okay, so Bijayji, from your presentation and also from Pranab's presentation, so what has come to the forefront is that ideology matters, because ideology is so instrumental in constructing the kind of political economy that we want to pursue. Yes, your elaboration.
Yeah, I mean, both of you can answer this briefly. Yeah. Although Sharath actually raised this issue and Dr. Bohidar indirectly answered it. I did answer it, yeah.
I think I did refer to that.
Yeah.
Ideology surely matters, and ideology provides a kind of framework for state policies and different other forms of state interventions, while camouflaging the real character of state and the development process, the growing inequalities, and also providing legitimacy to the character of state and the nature of development process. So ideology surely matters, absolutely. And that is perhaps the reason which explains the fact that the all-round failures and negligence of the state and by the state of such very important issues don't lead to a kind of equal amount of popular reactions against the regimes which hold power in the center and the state. So ideology is extremely important. I entirely agree with you.
Sharath, would you like to make a comment on this question?
May I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So I just want to know particularly about Kerala, that how did political party respond to this pandemic? In the sense that one was that political party was in government, but party as such outside the government, was there some new kind of initiative taken by the left parties outside the government? Means the party cadres? Did they also do something? And if they did something, so was that in collaboration with the government, or it was very independent initiative by the party? I'm just interested in this, but I want to see if nature of the Communist Party is also changing in last few years.
Pranav?
Yeah, sir. Actually, you see, sir, it is not that Kerala has always a communist party in government. If you see the history, other than this particular year, there has been always an alternative. But if we just see the labor movement, the history of labor movement also, along with it was that always that when the non-left government also has come, it was not that the basic common minimum, some core values that the labor government has adopted has been completely undone by the other government. It has never happened in the history of Kerala. So whatever the consolidation or whatever kind of you can say, even though we don't find that typical very militant kind of approach gradually coming down, more stabilized, more supportive kind of a labor, but still protecting their rights, etc. So during the last pandemic also, in terms of protecting, there is the issue of protecting the own worker and also issue of protecting the migrant worker. The government gave a huge amount of money, around 859 crores, I think, highest in the country, where different kind of benefits were given to around, I think, total number of worker, the list is something around 80 lakhs, if I'm forget, 84 lakhs, where 859 crore rupees was given. And many of these committees were also chaired by members of other party. It is by Congress or Muslim League. So there are many other who also were equally supporting the decision of the government. Of course, there was an issue, as Sarath has mentioned, that when there was in the media also, in media narratives as well as in discussions also, that there was when state was giving a lot of benefit to migrant workers also, some people are saying that we are not protecting their own worker, but it was not true. Kerala, Malayali workers also who were into different welfare fund board or otherwise, unorganized workers also were given benefits. And in this regard, both the government as well as the then opposition was also not against it. Kerala, they have somehow come, if you have understood, if you have studied the Kerala political transition, they have certain kind of a core values which do not compromise whenever government changes. Whenever there a different party comes, these issues, labor issues particularly, there have been no, because I have been chairing many of the industrial dispute committees as labor commissioner. When they're coming to discuss for some long-term settlement on any other issues, their common things they may have their own individual differences outside, but when the labor issues are coming, they have very, very huge support. However, as of now, there is not kind of a trade unionism of the migrant workers. But there was some attempt, I am told, I don't have any documentary proof, but there was some attempt. However, till now, there is not some kind of a political direct connect to trade unionism so far as the migrant workers in Kerala concerned. But the approach of all across political parties are very, very, to a large extent, very kind of a, you can see, the sensitive so far as labor issues are concerned, because they know the moment if you do not raise these, support these issues, it may not be, it may go large political discontent it may create. So they have arrived, I must say, some kind of a political maturity in this regard. It's not, there has been a broad consensus over so far as the labor issues are concerned. No party, whichever comes, they almost decide a similar way. I have been in Kerala for last almost 16, 17 years, seeing a lot of meetings and discourses. It is across political channels, understanding over labor issues are very similar. Whether right come to power or left come to power, doesn't, UDF or LDF, doesn't make much difference. They have their own individual issues. But so far as, because labor issues also create a huge public image for political parties in Kerala. So they don't want to compromise on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So,
Sir.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed
I'm
that.
sorry, my answer may not be very academically
No, no,
because
no, that's fine.
mine is
Don't,
little. I'm just
you can, you,
as a
This is
as a
this.
practitioner and as a practitioner,
No,
I'm
no,
telling I may not be touching the correct word academically correct,
no,
but this
no.
is the like as a bureaucrat, I'm telling. That's it.
okay,
Thank you.
that's fine. Sunil, there is a, I mean, there's a comment from Sunil in the comment box, but I don't think it's a question. So there are a couple of minutes at the end you can take. Uh, is there any other question? We have about, I think, 15, 16 minutes. I would like to take a few minutes at the end to
Uh,
sum up.
can I just add to
Yes.
like respond to Maninder?
Yeah, sure. I mean, very briefly, because then I'd like to
Yeah,
give a couple of minutes each to the speakers if they have any additional comment. Bijay indicated that he had some slightly some additional comments.
yeah.
Sure.
So just wanted to say that the political party which is in power and its class and mass organization or feeder organization in the commonsensical sense, they have played an important role in executing these uh, welfare measures or community support that was being given to the common people, including the guest workers. One was the, and it was as you asked whether it was in collaboration with the government. Yes, it was in collaboration with the government. So some part of it, so how it operates now is that some part of the um, welfare measure will be provided by the government, but it will be complemented by the work of voluntary work of this organization. For example, the government invest in making like ensuring that there are enough public hospitals for the people during the pandemic or in even in non-pandemic situation. But when it comes to setting up the frontline treatment centers, setting up the COVID this uh, COVID isolation centers and all these youth organizations, student organizations, and all play their own role in setting up the building, cleaning the area, and all. So it works in like it works like complementing the government efforts with the voluntary work. And just one more point that one should also note how this Chief Minister's Distress Relief Fund has been very interestingly being used in Kerala to build up a kind of subnational spirit, Malayali subnational spirit, uh, to ensure that okay, it has become some kind of indirect taxation where people are encouraged to contribute to the CMTRF, and that money is being used to build the to accelerate the welfare or deepen the welfare measures. So uh, all these can be this voluntary work and even this contribution to the CMDRF. All these are being clubbed together with the state action being taken.
Thanks. Bijay, you can have a couple of minutes just now if you like. Uh, Bijay doesn't seem to be online at the moment. Sharad, if you want
Sorry,
to.
I'm online.
Okay,
I'm
okay.
muted.
But not more than a couple of minutes,
Yeah,
please.
yeah, sure. Now, one thing that I would like to mention in the context of the present questions on political parties, in the context of Odisha, the left parties played a significant role in coming out and taking up, you know, the work of locating workers in the right places, securing their rights to health and to work, etc. The left parties did play a very important role. While at the same time, the organizational process of migrant workers have not yet begun. And here also I recognize that it's not easy to organize migrant workers. It's more easily said than done from our academic institutions. But at the grassroots level, there are very practical difficulties. The second thing that I would like to just make very quickly is that in spite of the state having a widespread machinery which includes this Anganwadi workers and helpers present in every village to generate data from the grassroots, from different houses, from where migrant workers have gone. I was really surprised to find that in spite of that, the government had not collected data on migrant workers. It was not that difficult. But perhaps there was no political will to do that, no bureaucratic will to do that either. Thank you.
Thanks. Sharad, last comment? Sorry, Pranab, a last comment?
Yes, sir. Sir, most important thing is that regarding the handling, we should not have to wait for coming a pandemic to come. It is perhaps we must thank the pandemic also for surfacing the issue. But now time has come. We should think about long-term perspective for migrant workers, and the lessons that we have learned during this time, the data that we have, pandemic-driven data that we have collected for it, all this we should put into, and more long-term perspective, like if whether in the workplace itself their rights can be protected, and that kind of an approach the state must have to take. And maybe perhaps for a state like Kerala it may be a little easy, but maybe for some other state it may take long time, because the large social engineering process also as a I think prelude to these activities have to happen. Otherwise, without making the foundation, I think we cannot make the structure. So foundation, social foundation also will be required. So that's why it is a long term. But I think from the from the academic perspectives, also a lot of these inputs, if comes to practitioners level, which may be definitely be useful for incorporating, for making more structured public policy, so far as the issues of the migrant workers of India as a whole, or maybe states are concerned. Thank you so much. This much lecture I want to add.
Thank you very much. I'll just take a very few minutes if it's okay. It's all right just now, and then
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
you will conclude the panel. So I think a lot of issues have come up, and thanks, Mani, for only keeping two people on the panel, because as speakers, and then Sarath, who reflected very thoughtfully, because that gave enough time to the speakers to, not only to say what they wanted to say, but also to come back and answer the questions and the discussions. So I think one of the basic things is that the whole issue of migrants and migrant policy has to be addressed within a framework of rights. And this is something which we understand very well. I mean, we have a constitution. India is a signatory, founding member of the International Labour Organization, one of the initial signatories to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So the question of both, fundamental rights, but also the whole question of rights at work and so on, is something which should be, we should encapsulate our discussion on migration. This has been pointed out very well by the speakers in some of the questions. Now, of course, this whole question of enforcement of right, because it's just not a legal issue, it's not just a question of creating a constitution, is this thing. And here we can see, number one, the vast differences across states in their local histories. I mean, Kerala is unique because it has much more than a century-old tradition of social, political, and working class movements. And then, as Sarath has rightly pointed out, it moved to a partisan system of government, which largely respected the demands coming from the ground. But then I think it was mainly, I must say, a contribution of the left government which consolidated and created new institutions which took this much further. And of course, one of the institutions, which really needs to be mentioned in this context is the whole question of local governance. Kutum Shri was a part of that. So when it came to the migrants crisis in Kerala, it was society at large local institutions in particular, societies including civil society organizations playing a role, and in this case supporting what the government did. But in the long run, let us put it the other way around. Actually, it is the governments which have supported the demands from below, and not that it is not that governments moved in a particular direction first. So history is matter, and of course the history of Odisha is very different from even the history of other zamindari states like UP or Bihar and so on. And it is it we I mean there's just that kind of history has not been there. Governments have not been proactive enough to be able to take this whole thing forward. That is certainly one issue. But when we talk about, but histories change. Histories are written and rewritten, and as we speak, history is being actually rewritten. And this is also happening not only in the national context, but this is also being attempted in Kerala's context. So yes, the bipartisan context of Kerala's politics and society has maintained a kind of equilibrium in response to grassroots movement. If at all that movement is disrupted from top or from the political, the political efforts that are happening, we frankly don't know what will happen in future, because histories do change. Nobody ever envisaged that there would be such a surge of Hindutva around Sabarimala and related issues in Kerala. So I think that we have to be cognizant of the fact that histories change. I did my fieldwork for many years in the district of Muzaffarnagar, where I listened at length to the shared histories of Hindus and Muslims in villages. And as I was speaking to them, I was conscious of the fact that history was being disrupted. And it resulted almost 2 decades later in what we saw in Muzaffarnagar a few years ago. So that also we have to be cognizant of, and that is something we must also, while we move histories forward, we also have to be very careful about the disruptions that occur, and to protect societies from any further disruption, which can be more harmful, which also, which has a certain perspective toward the constitution and so on and so forth. I think Kerala has been an outstanding exemplar. Of course, the migrant crisis, in dealing with the migrant crisis, but also look at the way it dealt with consecutive disasters. It faced 3 disasters in recent years, and it built up a vast machinery which again drew upon the same resources and dealt with them amazingly well. Both pandemic-related disasters, but also natural disasters. So that is something which we do need to understand. But there are chinks in Kerala's armor, and I think that also we need to appreciate if we want to take this forward in a particular perspective. One of the issues, frankly, which I've always had reservations about, is the label of guest workers being put on internal migrant workers in the state of Kerala. Now, the term guest worker has a very definite connotation in international migration. Guest workers are those who are invited for a period of 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 10 months, and then they're sent back to the countries. They enjoy very, very restricted rights while in the countries that they work. They enjoy some rights, according to whatever, let's say the EU convention and so on. But that's it. That's the end of it. I think guest is a nice connotation to it in India, but it doesn't extend the full notion of citizenship to migrants. And that also extends to other spheres. I mean, the question of trade unions was referred, But beyond trade unions, there is also the question of how Kerala dealt with specific programs and policies which kept migrants out, which created parallel circuits of social security and social protection for migrants, other than which existed for migrant workers. So rather than use the BOCW resources, a separate fund was created to deal with certain issues of social security and social protection. There is stigmatization of migrant workers in Kerala. It's very low, much, much lower than other states. So I think while we laud how the Kerala handled the crisis, Kerala's attitude, we must also acknowledge that even Kerala has still quite a way to go in this thing. There are very few countries in the world today who actually restrict migrant workers in the way, I mean, earlier it used to be China and Vietnam and so on with the system of hukou. But there were administrative restrictions which extended to other spheres. But China does it, India does it without legal and administrative controls. It does it in so many other ways. And that is something we have to be cognizant of. And that is something, of course, which has to be worked with not only at the state level, but also with the national level. Now, the question of citizenship and rights was very correctly posed during the pandemic. And I also mentioned to the fact that the pandemic was used to push in very anti-citizen, anti-worker legislation. We all know, and if we don't know, we should know a little more about how the four extremely seminal social codes, the labor codes, were pushed through Parliament at the height of the pandemic in September 2020. But September 2020, by the way, was when the pandemic peaked in India. The first wave peaked in India. And this is when the codes, labor codes, which were the most significant change in labor legislation which took place in India after independence, they were pushed through. Not only that, this happened in September. Even before that, in June 2020, the Central Labor Secretary sent out a letter to the states saying that you should initiate labor reforms. And the states then undertook a whole host of labor reforms. The states that were, had the same dispensation in the center were the most active. So it was the states of, Gujarat, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, and Himachal Pradesh, which is the most active, which tried to make absolutely wholesale reforms, completely abrogating the right of labor. And this was done in the guise of actually increasing employment and providing employment to migrant workers. And we know that none of this has happened or did happen. So this is absolutely correct that, the restriction on rights can be used in all sorts of authoritarian, anti-citizen and anti-worker ways. And this was exactly what was done in India by state governments and also by central government. What we have seen, and the final point I want to make without taking too much time, is a very important point which was made, but only partly, which is on this question of, I think, let me just try to recall that point which was made. I think citizenship rights, labor rights, all this we have actually talked about. We've already talked about the nature of center and the way the center state responses occurred during the pandemic. Let me stop here. Let me not take too much time. We already passed 4 o'clock. We're at 4 o'clock. So I'll hand it back to Akhil and to Manit.
Yes, I think Survesh, you can offer the formal vote of thanks.
Yeah, to wrap up the session, I would like to thank Professor Ravi Srivastava for joining us, chairing the session, and for his very, very significant comments. I would also like to thank our two speakers and the discussant for a delightfully informative session. And with that, we have come to the end of this session, and the next session will start at 4:15. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the video. Do like and share our video. For more seminars and talk, please subscribe to our channel. If you have any questions, comment on the video and don't forget to press the bell icon for future updates.